We know so many people, and yet we still don't feel known. Most of us aren't lonely for more interaction. We're lonely for more intimacy. Most of us aren't lonely just to like go to more social events. We're like lonely because we want to feel more supported and seen. So really our loneliness is, and a big time in corporate, big time in workplaces. We are coming home, and I'm often saying the profile of a lonely person today is not this recluse who's isolated, who's like nobody's heard from in a long while. The definition of loneliness today is somebody who's like a caretaker, who's got a job where they're caretaking for other people. They're checking and making sure everyone else is okay. They're taking care of a team. They're doing customer service. They're taking care of clients and vendors, and they're taking care of all the people around them. And then they come home and they're taking care of kids and spouses and family members, and they're taking care of their kids' friends, and they're managing their spouses' friends and family.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin here with another episode of Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck. And this episode, I still can't believe that in 280 plus episodes, we've never really dove into friendships and loneliness. And except for Nicole and I maybe kind of making shit up. But today we're definitely not making stuff up. We're talking with Shasta Nelson, who is the most genuine, sweet powerhouse you'll ever meet. She's a former pastor turned keynote speaker, author. She's authored 3 books. I think she's working on her 4th. She's been on the Today Show, the Steve Harvey Show, Harvard Business Review. She's been part of Harvard Business Review, but also part of their podcast. Like TEDx has more than 800,000 views, and she has so much passion and unique perspective on this topic of belonging and this epidemic of loneliness and how friendships, we can do them better and we can do them in a way that helps combat that. So some of the things that we talk about, of course, we dive into how being a pastor has really helped her see things that others couldn't. And I ask her a little bit about, like, if you wave your magic wand, what would the ultimate quote unquote church look like these days? We talk about the 3 things all friendships must have. This is all based on research and data. We also talk about, this is probably the most important thing, how setting a routine and like this capsule for your friendships, it's really key. And this concept of consistency that we just don't think about and we don't plan for. And then we just say there's not enough time. And she really talks to us about the importance and really got me thinking about how I need to do things differently. We talk about the business case for having a best friend at work. So if you don't have a best friend at work, it's about time to get one. And then we also talk about her book, That Story, and how she pushed back several different occasions where people gave her career advice around her book title and what she talked about. And she pushed back. And if she wouldn't have, it would have derailed her work. So I think that's going to be really powerful and inspirational as you apply that to some of the advice you're constantly getting slapped with. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Shasta Nelson. So I want to start with the fact that you went to school, you were a communications major, you thought you wanted to be a war correspondent.
Because doesn't that sound so amazing when you're like watching the news and they're like wearing helmets and being like, there's bombs exploding behind us. I'm like, that's so cool.
And it does, right? At 20-some years old. And then at some point you pivoted and got your master's in divinity and became a pastor. Like, what? So I know it's very cliche, but we have to start there. How did that happen?
Yeah. You know, what's so funny is each of the different career switches I've had at the time seemed like war correspondent, pastor don't seem at all similar. And yet it was so amazing because I think I internalized this, like our world is, I'm not sure I would have had the language of this back then, but like our world is broken. And rather than just telling everybody about it, I'd rather be a part of like fixing it. And I, rather than being a correspondent about all the problems, I would rather be somebody who's like solution oriented and trying to create connection. And for the world I was in at the time, being a pastor was like, that's where community happened. That's where I thought you could like kind of change the world. That's where people came together and helped each other and supported each other and tried to make a difference in the world. You fast forward 10, 12 years of pastoring, and I was realizing that I really hungered so much for this lonely world that we live in. And I was seeing more and more loneliness, and fewer people were coming to churches for that. And churches weren't doing all that great of a job, quite frankly, of always being that community. They were often exclusive. Often you have to believe what I believe, behave the way I behave. And I found myself really wanting to be creating community for just a lonely world. So it felt like another really big career pivot when I was like, I actually left that to do a startup for friendship, like the first maps.com for a friendship. And that seemed like a really big change to go from pastoring to that. But I look back and I'm just like, no, actually, that's like the same work I was doing, just different language, different context, but yeah. So that's kind of the career trajectory.
Yeah, so interesting, right? Because we know certain terms so definitively, like pastor, doctor, teacher. And I think we don't connect and go a layer deeper into what are they truly doing. And it's actually interesting when I was thinking about you being a pastor. I mean, the obvious one is, okay, yes, you have sermons, you preach, you now you're a professional speaker, duh. But then I was thinking about it. That's only a small part of a pastor's job, right? A big part is people confiding in you in the, sometimes the lowest of times, and probably really leaning on you. Was there anything that you learned in terms of both helping people and maybe even boundaries as well in that part of your job as a pastor, as you helped friends in the community that you now teach now?
100%. I think of the church world as like my laboratory for being the friendship scientist that I am now. It was like so many questions got asked during that time for me that were like, so if a visitor comes to church and they walk away and say, well, that church was too cliquey, like my brain would be like, well, were those cliques or were those just friends that know each other and you felt like an outsider? Like, what's the difference, and what's the difference between being friendly and developing friendships? And what's the difference between like what is on the visitor to come and do? And how many times should a visitor need to come before they actually feel like they belong? And what's on the community to do? And it was just fascinating to me to like explore all the dynamics of belonging. And what does it take to belong? And if two people both come for 2 months and why one person feels like they belong and why one doesn't feel like they belong. And like, that's just fascinating to me. And I did a lot of marriage counseling. Watching all the behind the scenes of these like perfect marriages. And I know in the pastor's office what's going on and like the dynamics. And so you're kind of seeing relationships at their worst often and seeing like what patterns get repeated over and over and over and how two people can say they love each other, but neither person feels it. That was really good education for me. I had to facilitate a lot of small group trainings. A lot of churches have like small group programs. And I saw that a lot of people made the mistake of like, well, we're going to get 10 people in a room and we're just going to like be really vulnerable and that's going to bond us. And I watched some groups and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's like healthy, like just telling everyone their life story and like, And then on the other hand, you've got other groups that all they did was talk about the Bible and not bonding at all. And so that was fascinating to me. Like, how do we do something where we are building healthy bonds? And so, yeah, so much learning came out of that.
What if you had to wave your magic wand? So just background on me. I didn't grow up in a religious environment. I was actually baptized at the age of 30. Funny story, into the Greek church. I'll tell you something.
Wow.
Just like the movie, bathing suit, big tub, oil on my feet. And so we are now part of a Greek Orthodox church. So I went from sort of no real upbringing in the church to one of the oldest of times that hasn't changed, right? And we see it, right? We see the diminishing numbers. We all know that sort of church as it was once known is not necessarily thriving in a lot of places. If you had to wave your magic wand, because you've done so much since then, what does the new quote unquote church look like?
That's such a great question, Erin. I already am loving this conversation. These are questions I don't get asked and we don't explore very much. I've thought about a lot, like what is the new church, like outside of church? I think churches are failing people in so many ways. I'm so grateful for the people who are going and are finding local expressions that are really meaningful and fulfilling. The vast majority of people right now are not, and are off and actually turned off by it. And we have not come up with a good alternative. Kind of in my world now, I speak a lot about loneliness and a lot about kind of just our social infrastructure. We used to have elk lodges and we used to have bowling leagues and we used to have like PTAs that were really big. We used to have like all the, like just kind of the quintessential, like the neighborhood associations of sitting out on our porch and the belonging and just all these ways of connecting that have all just kind of frayed and just really don't exist that much anymore and are kind of seen more on the fringe. And so we have not created really good replacements for that. I think we're having to do a lot more piecemealing of it. And so instead of like having one church or one community that kind of does so many things for us, now most of us are having to kind of be like, okay, well, this is where I get my social needs met. This is where I go do my spiritual growth. This over here is where I do my volunteer work and make this. And so we're kind of having to piecemeal it in different ways together. And I would love to create something. I mean, I think there's still so much strength, so much amazing stuff that can happen with a church. I unfortunately think theology just gets in the way. I don't care. I don't care as much about people believing like I believe or needing to agree that this is how we're going to interpret this or like that stuff just so gets in the way. And our ideology is so divisive. But the concept of a whole bunch of people coming together on a regular basis and doing life together and like journeying and having all the different generations and having the different like just like the sense of support, like it's one of the most beautiful things in the world.
Yeah, and no pressure. Help us build it. No pressure. But you are. So I know you've done so much. You said, you started the dating app. You don't just speak. You have so many different ventures. You're a well-known TV personality, which is ironic, right? Because you're not in the, and you don't have to probably wear a hard hat when you went on the Today Show. But tell us about the recent initiative that I know you launched, I think out west near you around different communities and new people to communities. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, the U.S. Chamber of Connection. So similar to how the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is kind of all across our country and has like local chapters, we are trying to create a infrastructure for connection. And so we're doing a pilot program right now in Seattle. Aaron Hurst is kind of the founder of that, and I'm on the board helping. They've bequeathed upon me the title of Chief Friendship Officer, which makes me just laugh because it sounds so amazing and so cool. And it's the only way I'll ever be a CFO of anything. So I'm like quite pleased with that. But really, they're doing most of the groundwork. But it's been really fun to be a consultant and advising and kind of thinking through. Our goal is to create something that when people are new to a city, and so in Seattle, so the newcomers, like, what could we do to help gather them, to help them feel like they belong quickly? How can we introduce them to each other? How can we get them a blueprint or a roadmap for like belonging and help them really feel like they are connected in all the ways that matter? And so it's so fun to like brainstorm that and dream that up and kind of be talking about what can we do that then could be scalable if we were to go across cities across the country. We've got our eyes on Atlanta and Washington, D.C., and just kind of starting to think about how we can roll this thing out. And what's fascinating, Erin, is that we went in there thinking, okay, how do we find people who just moved to Seattle? So you kind of start announcing it, you start doing all this stuff. And what's really interesting is how many people are coming. They've lived in Seattle for 4 years and they're coming. They've lived there for 8 years.
I knew you were going to say that because as you're talking, I'm like, this is the new church. Like, this is, and maybe, I don't want to be the most annoying, go from being a cool podcast host to annoying podcast host and tell you what to do. But, there could be some branding opportunities here where, you could say it's like, it's like church without the, fill in the blank. And sort of, it doesn't matter if it's been 2 months or 10 years that you've been there.
Yeah. You know what? One of the hard things. So I'm going to just go into my friendship research mode for 1 second here. So when I study relationships, when I study culture, when I study teams, when we study anything that bonds people together, there's 1,000 different ways that we can define it. There's like, we could list 1,000 ingredients of what needs to be. Some people are like, we need trust, we need this, we need laughter, we could spend all day talking about all the things we need in there. And I have found that three things have to be present. They're non-negotiables. Everything else we would describe is a synonym of these three things, an outcome of these three things, or an illustration of these three things. So these three things are positivity, which means pleasant emotions. Like at the end of the day, we need to feel enjoyable. We need to feel accepted. We need to feel loved. We need to have laughter. Like you can throw all the stuff about joy and feeling supported in there. We need to have consistency, which is repetition. This is where trust is built. This is where hours are logged. This is where we kind of like have shared experiences and interactions with each other. And the third requirement is vulnerability. This is where we feel like we know each other. This is where we feel like we're sharing our stories, learning about each other, practicing our authenticity, having opinions, speaking up for what we need, dealing with conflict. So positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And I bring that up, and we can go in deeper in that if that's helpful. But I bring that up because this is the one that makes what we were talking about church hard these days, is that most of us aren't willing to be consistent somewhere. And so we could run a program in Seattle and be like, come, but most people wouldn't come every week, right? We're so scared to commit and we just are like too busy, we say. And we just have like, I don't have the energy and like all the things. But without that consistency, we will never have that sense of community. And that's one of the things church did really, really well for a long time, is it just became a pattern in these people's lives. It was a rhythm. It wasn't just something that they did randomly. It was something that was just built into their weekly rhythm. And now even the people who go to church, I've been reading Gallup polls, and even the people who attend church, like it's considered regular attendance if you go once a month now. So I mean, it's like we just don't, most of us, even if they're in the church world, regularity and consistency are pulled back. And so we'll never feel close in a relationship without building that consistency in some form or another. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, honestly, when you think about creating something new in our world. And this is why my last book is on friendships in the workplace, because that is one of the few places we still are consistent. And it's not necessarily because we have the energy to be in, because we want to be it, because we're paid to be. And so that is where we make friends. That's the number one place we make friends as an adult, not because those are the people we would choose out of a lineup of options. It's because we're consistent with them. And so we start building that familiarity and that comfortableness that happens with that consistency.
That's so good, because I can think about how hard it would be. And then my brain goes to, well, I have to pretty much freaking cook dinner like 5 days a week or figure out what the heck we're going to eat. Why can't we replace one of those, one of those constants with this? But back to what you said about work, I know one of the things you talk about is how do you keep that going, though? And I think for my audience, it's largely corporate and lives in a world now where people are changing jobs more frequently. They're having rifts, et cetera. Me, as somebody who left the corporate world 6.5 years ago, it feels almost impossible, right? To keep all those friendships I had. Like I would love to have lunch every day with people. What do we do? How do we do that? How do we make that easier?
Yeah, that consistency piece is coming back to that, because we're changing jobs so frequently. We're moving homes. We're just like going across the country. So we're randomly moving. I should say randomly. We're just moving. Life is changing a lot more for each of us. And so some of the research shows that we are replacing half our close friends every 7 years. And that's not because we don't like those friends. It's not because we had a big blow up with them. It's not because we were like, we're breaking up. It's because life changed. We don't live next to them. We don't work at the same job. We're not going to that church anymore. Our kids graduated from the same school, whatever the case may be. We went through a divorce, and like, it just kind of, our consistency is what changed. And this is what ends most relationships. And I shouldn't say ends, because we live in a world with social media now where we often don't feel like it ended, but it just, we drifted, right? And so this is what drifts most relationships, is our consistency ended. And we never, as friends or as colleagues or as whatever, we never had a conversation about what is our new consistency going to be. We used to be friends because our kids were in the same swim team. And so we sat in the bleachers together and we saw each other the whole time. Now our kid graduated and we never said, what do we want to do now to keep our friendship going? Are we going to be the friends who start walking on Tuesdays? Are we going to be the friends who go camping? Are we going to be the friends who talk and call each other on the phone? But it's not because we don't like each other. And so as a lot of your former colleagues, like that's one of the hardest things. I hear so much heartbreak story where people will end a job And they'll say to me as they're talking to me, they'll just be like, well, I thought I had really good friends, but like I've been gone for 6 months and none of them even called me. So I guess they were like fake friends, right? And I guess they didn't, I guess I really wasn't that
Mhm.
important. And we get really hurt. And I said, no, they were probably amazing friends, but your container was showing up at the same job over and over. And that was the repetition. That was the habit. That was the pattern of your friendship. And you left that pattern and you didn't help establish a new pattern. And so there, you didn't have a habit of calling each other and getting together on the weekend. You only had a habit of being together when you were both in the container at work. And it's amazing that you got to build so much relationship at work. But if you want those friendships to last, you're going to have to figure out a new way of interacting with them and putting new consistency in place. And most of us aren't doing that.
How do we do it without overwhelm? So what are some like small little tips? Because I think everyone would agree, but then it's like, oh my gosh, the classic, like you can only manage
Yep.
whatever the number is, 50 friends or whatever.
Yep.
What are some
Yep.
practical things we're not doing that we should start doing to make that repetition come back into
Yeah. So prioritize, like think through, like actually name those people. So we can be close to anywhere between 3 to 6 people. Most of us report the greatest levels of happiness with that number. So like, who are your 3 to 6 people that you're like, I am going to maintain consistency with them. I'm going to prioritize these people. I'm going to be at their big events. I am going to, busy will not be part of my vocabulary in that way for these people. And then like, who are my 10 to 15 people that are like, kind of the next ring out, if you will. Like these are people who I would be sad if we lost touch. Like they're part of my community. They're my people who are kind of like go-to people in certain ways. And know who those people are. Like I'm really big on helping people assess and evaluate their relationships. All of my books, I walk people through, how to identify and articulate and actually do a checkup or an audit on your relationships. And who are those people? Like who would you put in that next group out? And if you can't name them, you're going to be less likely to know how to prioritize them. But once you can name them, then you can start going down and evaluating them. Like, so this friend, she and I get together once a month and we always meet at the same hamburger place. And we like it happens to be whenever she's been on this side of town because she goes to the dentist and we schedule something. And like, that's our pattern, right? Does that, and then we can ask the question, does that pattern work? Or do I wish it were more frequent? Or do I wish we did other things on top of that? And like, then we can actually look at the pattern. What's so cool about friendship is you can look at every relationship in your life and see a pattern. Like that's the friend that we go walking with. That's the friend I text once a day. That's a friend I call once every 6 months. That's the friend we have patterns. That's the friend I see at the book club. And so we all have a pattern to our friendships. And what's interesting is we never, ever, ever sat down at the beginning of meeting somebody and saying, what's our pattern going to be? Like we didn't like decide it. We just kind of formed it. And the cool thing about that is we can change it like that just as easily. We can shift it. We can be the friends who meet for hamburgers when she comes on this side of town for the dentist. And then a conversation can like talk about something and we can be like, you know what? There's that author coming into town. You want to go to the book signing with me? And suddenly now we're the friends who like go to this thing. And then we end up being like, that was fun. We should like find other authors who are coming into town. And like suddenly, I'm talking about one of my friends, Jamie, and this is exactly what happened. And suddenly we're like in a situation where it's like, oh, Liz Gilbert's coming. Let's go to that. And suddenly we're now the friends that like, yes, we get burgers when she's at the dentist, but now we also like are going to all these different inspirational events and conferences and doing this stuff. And then suddenly we're shifting the pattern. And suddenly we're the friends who also text each other and check in on something because you told me that you had this big thing coming up. And so I'm checking in on you. So we can change those patterns by adding frequency, by adding like new events, by thinking through other ways of gluing our lives together. So anybody, like if we're only getting together as couples, what can I do to just reach out to the wife of that other couple and do something outside the pattern where it's just the two of us getting together instead of only getting together with our kids? What can I do to do something with just the other moms? Obviously that could just, 1,000 examples could be done there. But like, what can I do to add to the way we interact and to help this person start meeting new friends? But none of that changing of the pattern happens if you don't first start say, who do I have in my life that I prioritize? And what is our current pattern? And how is that working for me? Is it frequent enough? A lot of us have our best friends. Like I've done so much work around this, Erin, and I'll be like, who are your best friends? And they'll like name people that they were friends with in college. They'll name people that they like from their first job. And I'll be like, when's the last time you saw that person? It was like 2 years ago. When's the last time you talked to that person? Oh, we just talk every 6 months or once a year. So that's great. They'll say, but we can pick up right where we left off. And that's great. That means you have the positivity and the vulnerability. And I'm doing this as a triangle. My hands, I can't do it without because I teach it on a triangle. But that means those relationships, you have done the vulnerability, you know each other, so you can step into that and it always feels good. So you trust it. So you have the positivity and the vulnerability. And at some point you had the consistency, which helped you build that intimacy. But you don't have enough consistency right now to really feel like you're living life and knowing what's going on in each other's lives and truly feeling supported. So a lot of us have the kind of relationships where we're like, I know they would be there for me if I needed them. So there is a level of emotional support, but most of us aren't living lives where we're actually accessing that support, where we actually feel like we know what's going on in each other's lives and are like living through it together. So that consistency is a big deal.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like that there's an intentionality that we don't have. And, I think that gets to like, oh, we're always like, well, I would love to, but I'm too busy. Well, it's because you're not planning, you're not intentional. And I think for a lot of our listeners, we sort of pose this as mostly Gen X listeners, like myself. A lot of us are coming into a new phase of life where our kids are older. I have a 14 and 17-year-old now. And, things like, you're talking and I grew up in Michigan and, some really close girlfriends from college and over time, less and less. And then I kind of ditched Facebook. So I like less and less know what's going on. And I have a talk coming up in Michigan in July and one in Chicago in June. And one's in Michigan one. And I reached out. Of course, the text I was like, remember me, which is really sad because they're really good friends. But I now have more freedom. It sounds terrible, but before it was like if I have a talk, I'm like in and out, right? And like there's not even I got to get back because the kids have a million things and blah blah blah. And so I think for a lot of us that are going to this next phase where there's a little more breathing room, whether it's to travel or to go for a walk on a Saturday because we're not at a soccer field all day, or because the kid thing. I know.
Yeah.
You don't have children,
It's
but
huge.
you know how it goes.
It's huge. It's huge.
So I think it's really a great anecdote. Like as I start to go into this next phase, like I'm instead of beating myself up that I've lost, I'm just going to sort of be like, well, this is Erin, version 4.0 or whatever.
Yes.
And I can go. I think of a really good college friend that I saw out in Seattle probably 5 years ago on a work trip. We hadn't seen each other forever. So we were roommates for a couple of years. We were in the same sorority. And she was joking about, she's like, I just want to go live in the villages with all my old friends, because her parents had a place. And I'm like, I don't want to live in the villages. But, just because I haven't seen Serena in forever, that doesn't mean that our next phase, we can't sort of say, this is my friend who,
100%.
meets on vacation for a 3-day trip or what have you. So,
I love that. I love what you're doing. I love that you're like thinking back on who you would want to be close to and who you've lost touch with. I mean, here's one more statistic is that one of the studies showed out of University of Kansas, Dr. Jeffrey Hall, he did this thing that said we reported that it takes about 200 hours before we feel like we call somebody a best friend. So somebody who we really have like logged the hours with. But I think about that as an investment. And so some of us, that's why it's so hard to feel so close to somebody as an adult, because if you just meet up for lunch or coffee, every 2 or 3 months, it's going to take you forever to like build that knowledge base and that intimacy. And you can like instantly like each other, but to like know each other and to like know how you take your coffee and how you respond to this and what makes you laugh, like that just takes knowing and time together. But you think about, you put in 200 hours with some of these people. So one of the most powerful things we can do is I often have reporters call me and they're like, we have a loneliness epidemic. Like, how do people go meet new people? How do they go make friends? And for some of us, that is a legit need to go do. For a lot of us, it's like, we actually know enough people. Yeah. We just need to like go deeper with the people we already know. We just need to pick back up some of those relationships. We just need to like figure out a new pattern that helps us stay a little bit more connected. And you could pay, the payoffs. Like you've already done so much investment into that you can like live off the interest of some of those friendships if you just kind of reestablish them.
Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me, they get noticed more than me, they have better luck than me, they're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed. I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It was my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things. Let's talk about friendimacy.
It's a hard one. Friendimacy.
Friendimacy. It's a T. Friendimacy, which is the name of your podcast, and a term you coined. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's actually the title of my second book too, and it's about friendship. It's friendship intimacy, and I had to coin it because I was saying we all need more intimacy in our lives, and everybody kept thinking I was talking about sex, and I was like, yes, I want more of that for you too if you want that. But I'm actually talking about like we need the intimacy of platonic relationships and friendships, and so yeah, it's the experience of where both people feel seen in safe and satisfying ways, and so it's the highest expression of positivity, vulnerability, and consistency. It's the people who we have so much consistency with them that we have that trust, that repetition. It leaves us feeling safe. We have so much vulnerability with them. It leaves us feeling known and seen and understood. And we have so much positivity with them because these are people who we know love us and are there for us, and they know how to love us in meaningful ways. And so, yeah, I teach it all on a triangle. And at the very bottom of the triangle is where all new relationships start. And it's only as we practice these three things that people move up the triangle. And most of us, when we're lonely, it's not for more people at the bottom of our triangle. It's for more people at the top of our triangle. Like most of us are lonely because we don't have the 3 to 6 people at the top of that triangle. We know so many people, and yet we still don't feel known, and I'm always saying like, most of us aren't lonely for more interaction. We're lonely for more intimacy. Most of us aren't lonely just to like go to more social events. We're like lonely because we want to feel more supported and seen. So really, our loneliness is, and big time in corporate, big time in workplaces. We are coming home, and I'm often saying the profile of a lonely person today is not this recluse who's isolated, who's like nobody's heard from in a long while. The definition of loneliness today is somebody who's like a caretaker, who's got a job where they're caretaking for other people. They're checking on making sure everyone else is okay. They're taking care of a team. They're doing customer service. They're taking care of clients and vendors, and they're taking care of all the people around them. And then they come home and they're taking care of kids and spouses and family members, and they're taking care of their kids' friends, and they're managing their spouses' friends and family. And it's like, these are the people who are lonely. They're so busy and they're so lovable and they're so taking care of so many other people. But like at the end of the day, how seen do you feel? How supported do you feel? How truly held do you feel? And that's where a lot of our loneliness is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the simple things that we all yearn. It's things like somewhere to quickly call or text and tell about a win we had, or when we pooped our pants in public, like, or, the good things and the bad things. And if I think about some of my closest friends, it's like, it's those people that you don't even start a new text chain or whatever. It's just like a running dialogue of the highs and the lows.
The
right?
consistency is there.
The
Yeah. The
highs and
bridge
the
is
lows.
built. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. With vulnerability, we often think of like the lows. We often think of sharing our insecurities or our shame, but vulnerability, especially for women, it's almost more vulnerable to share our wins and what we're proud of
Right.
and how we're proud of our kids and what we love about our spouse still and how we feel like we're thriving in our jobs or like learning how to be proud in our friendships is super vulnerable and important to do. I love that. Yeah. Highs and lows are so important. But yeah, that takes that consistency because anytime we have friendships where we leave off, we feel like we have to do updates. We have to catch up. We have to say, how are the kids? How is the job? How is the trip? But but if the more you're interacting, the more you're texting, you don't have to like ask those questions first. You can just be like, oh my goodness, this just happened today. And you can just dive in, which is so intimate and powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I would love for our listeners, like think about three of your, let's just start with work colleagues since this is sort of a workish. And ask yourself, A, do you have their cell phone? B, if you do, or if you don't, get it. And if you do, can you just either start or ask for permission? Like, hey, would you mind if we just texted, outside, during work, outside of work, our highs, our lows. I remember one of the most impactful things I had when I was a boss, and I'm talking about when I was the CEO of a company. So this was like a senior executive at the parent company. And I had many bosses, but one of them actually had a text thread with all of us. And that's a simple thing, Shasta. That I was now, and we would use it for, stupid stuff for memes or whatever. But that feeling of less loneliness and connection to the team, I think it's sometimes just simple things like that, like a leader giving your team permission to connect in a way just by little things like group chat on your cell, which is such an intimate, right? This is, unfortunately, the phone is, an intimate part of our bodies these days.
It is. It's just that feeling like we have access to each other is so, so, so important. And I love your word permission. That's such a great word. I often, when I'm in companies and I talk about, I always say like, culture, I have an assessment that I use when I go into companies because I'm like on those three requirements of relationship because culture is nothing but the relationships the group has with each other, right? So we can still go in and evaluate the same way, like how much does each person feel seen in a safe and satisfying way here? So it's the same definition. We can go in and evaluate the health of a culture based upon these three things. And so many times, leaders will be like, what's the most important thing I can do to and they always like to do these elaborate big, like Christmas parties or this big offsite or, like all these big things.
Oh,
and I'm like, those are fun sometimes, but I was like, it's amazing how many holiday parties you can have that don't facilitate bonding at all, So it's like, it's not just about putting events together. To your point, I'm like, does your team even know that you want them to be connected? Like most of them feel guilty and they're not sure if it's even appropriate to be texting each other. Are you sharing the data about how much it helps their workplace if they have friends at work? And are you saying that you hope they build friends? And are you saying I'm supportive of you building healthy friendships at the workplace? Are you talking about your friendships? Like just giving the permission. I did this one research study when I was working on my book for friendships in the workplace. And I asked people, do you have a friend at work? About a best friend at work, about 22% of people. Do you want a best friend at work? 85, 90% of people, yes. Does your boss want you to have a friend at work? Drops down to like 40, 50%. Like a lot of us want friends, but we actually don't know if we are supposed to have them. We do have them. I mean, it is the number one place we make friends as adults, but we feel somewhat like shy about it. Yeah.
And if you're a boss and you don't want that, but you want to retain employees, you're an idiot, right? Like, let's get back to like the main things, like retention and employers. And I'm like,
trust the data. Trust the data. Stop being squirmy about like your own personal feelings
and trust how you feel. I mean, too many leaders don't think, oh, what would I want? And assume that everybody else wants the same. I mean, for me, you could give me a holiday party or like snarky work memes are like my love language, right?
I love it.
And those are a lot less expensive and the pattern is more easily replicable. Let's go to the negative side. Well, maybe not negative side, but I know in your podcast, a lot of what you sort of vulnerably share real time with some of your real friends. Are things that you guys tripped up over and, challenges or maybe rifts you had. What's the biggest, if you think through those, what's the one where you had a clash and you learned something that's really stuck with you the most or stuck with your listeners the most?
Mm. Yeah, I woke up a year ago and was like, I can't just keep preaching about how intimate relationships can't happen without disappointment. Like our closest people aren't close to us because everything's gone well. It's because we've gone through some stuff together, right? And like that's true of our marriages, it's true of our family relationships. Like we don't feel safe because we've never fought with our spouse. We feel safe because we fought with them and recovered, and we believe that we can fight through anything or go through anything, right? And so I was like, I can't just keep saying that. I need to model it. So yeah, every episode I brought on a friend and we talked about something hard. Your question is so good. I mean, I feel like I borrowed from all of them because what we did is we came on and we said, okay, so in our friendship, this is one of the times where one of us hurt each other, where we had a misunderstanding, where life kind of just shifted for us. Let's go back to that moment and dissect it. What were you feeling in this moment? What was I feeling? What do you wish I had done differently? What could I have done differently? Like, what did you need from me? So it was so powerful. Like, it was really bonding. I mean, these are my best friends, and yet I was so much closer to them. And I kind of like the podcast was amazing for that. I was like, it's kind of awkward and hard to do without a podcast or without a context. Just be like, let's just talk about a site we had 15 years ago and back into the talk about. But it was really bonding. I learned so much about like what my friends needed and were feeling, and how hard I was on myself sometimes, that they actually were just like, I think you showed up amazingly in this, but like just kind of talking through and affirming each other. It was so powerful. One of the friendships that was kind of hard to come on and do, there's so many, we're really good friends now, but there was a season of our life where lives just looked so different. She was like a conservative pastor's mom in Texas and was homeschooling her kids, and just like her life looked so different from mine, where I was like on book tour in San Francisco and like just didn't have kids and was just like, and there was times where we were talking on the phone and I was just like, oh my word, like our lives just like there was just these moments, and we made it through that. We had enough consistency and we just kept the pattern going. And it's so interestingly that you kind of fast forward, and she left the church. Her kids grew up, and like that shifted. She just, and like, we just, like now she's like one of my favorite people. We have so much in common, but it was like, I think back on that and like, that's kind of crazy that we didn't end our friendship when it felt like we had nothing in common anymore. And how grateful I am that we didn't, that 30 years later, I can still say this is a friend of mine for 30 years and we've gone through all this stuff, but talking about what it felt like to be different from each other. And how do we empathize as like a non-mom with a mom of young kids? And how do we like celebrate each other when she's having a rough day being a stay-at-home mom and I'm on book tour? Like, how do we hold the space for both those things, and not hold back? And so it was really, I mean, powerful learnings that you can't have friendships where you feel like you're downplaying or holding back or not showing up as who you are, and learning how to like really accept and be curious. And for me to ask questions like, what's your favorite thing about being a mom at this age? And what's the hardest thing about this age? And how is that shifting it as a non-mom? For me to just show complete interest in that area and like to learn how to do that with each other. We don't have to have matching lives. I think we so often go through the world thinking we need to have the exact same kids at the same ages, and we need to like have similar jobs and we just want all these similarities. And really it doesn't. Commonalities don't matter unless they help us do positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. So if the fact we're both moms helps us be more vulnerable, then yes, it helps. But if we can get that vulnerability without both being moms, just as powerful, right?
Yeah.
But yes, both loving and kayaking is a great thing if it helps us get out and spend time together and have that consistency. But otherwise, just both loving kayaking isn't going to make our friendship any better than someone else. So the commonalities help if they support our consistency, our vulnerability, our positivity. But we often go around just thinking we need twins, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you know, but I have a co-host for the show, and we do episodes together about every 1 or 2 episodes. And she is a divorced mother of no children. I'm, married almost 21 years with 2 children. Like, and I went to public school. She went to Ivy League. She's Italian and big and crazy, and I'm Midwestern.
You're so crazy.
We are completely different. But at our core, right? Our humor, and to your point, and our consistency is really good because we've been doing podcasts together for 6.5 years. So
yes.
not everybody can podcast with their friends, but
Love
you're
that.
absolutely right. Like we couldn't be really much different than we are. And we're, great friends. So
That's so great.
hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too. Just two more questions for you. This has been great. First of all, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I think you know this all too well, and our listeners probably do. People don't talk about friendships and relationships much. And actually, speaking of Nicole, my co-host, she has really big passion around this. And in fact, she's going to write a book someday. And it's been everything from titled "Leave Me the Fuck Alone" to like something around friendships. But this whole concept I know is really important to her. And in fact, in my second book, there was a little tiny snippet on friendships, and my publisher was like, "Oh, I really want to dive into that." So this is like, thank you for coming on. And we've done 280 some episodes. And I think the only episodes we've really done on friendship have been Nicole and I BSing our way through a bunch of stuff. So
I love that. Well, thanks for highlighting it.
Amazing.
Thanks
and the
for
work you're
highlighting it.
doing is amazing. And I'm going to be annoying and keep pushing you to do more because
Thank you.
I think the world of you, and I think the world needs more of you. With that said, I have two final questions that I ask everybody. The first one is, we love to get we call it a buck that story about a time where you sort of bucked the norm and great things happened to you. Can you think of a time when that happened?
Boy, I bet there's so many. Let me think of one. I think honestly, with this whole loneliness thing, I think I have been bucking the norm. I started talking about loneliness back in 2008. And I would say, just say up until the pandemic. So that's like 12 years. Every time I would use the word loneliness, people would be like, I don't think you should use that word. I don't think it markets well. Like, I don't think it and even like my publishers on friendship, they were just like, people don't buy books on friendship. Maybe we should call it something else. Or even my workplace book, people were like, yeah, let's call it connection in the workplace. Let's call it. And I was like my word, like loneliness and friendship and like my theme, my topic has not been the norm. And people are just like, people don't want to admit they're lonely. And so I feel like I've always been bucking the norm. And I remember like all the stages along the way where I have to be like, should I change this word? Should I talk about this differently? Should I not talk about this? And all along the way, I was like, emotional intelligence means naming what we're feeling and doing something about it. And if we're not naming it as loneliness, then like, it's like saying that let's not call it hunger if we're hungry for food. Like, well, what are you going to call it? Like, you're hungry for food. Like, let's take the shame away from it and say, when you're hungry for food, you need to name that you're hungry for food because then you can go get the need met and go find food. And the same is true. Like, if you're not calling it loneliness, if we create a whole bunch of shame around it, then everybody's walking around being like, oh no, I think I'm just bored. And they just scroll through their phone, or they go, oh, I think I'm hungry. And they go get food out of the fridge. Like, we actually need to like help teach people to be like, don't feel shame around it. It's a human need. Your body is sending you a message whenever you need support and connection. That loneliness is saying that you want more of that. And that's a really beautiful message to receive. So, like, let's not use the word. Let's instead reframe it and like say this loneliness is normal. It's a human need telling you that you have an unmet need right now. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, just like you're not a bad person for needing sleep every night. You're not a bad person for needing water. It's a human body need. So I really hung on that and said, let's just keep calling it that. You know, the friendship in the workplace thing. People are like, well, I don't know if we really need that here. And I'm like, the research is so clear. Like, oh my word. Gallup for like decades, and there's one example, but for decades have been monitoring, do you have a best friend at work? And it is the question that correlates the most to engagement, which means better customer service, less sick days, better culture, like all the things you want your team to have. It comes down to if they feel like they have a best friend. And it was really fascinating. I was talking to the head scientist at Gallup when I was doing the research for the book. And he said, we have tested it every which way. We've asked the question, like, do you like the people you work with? Do you have a friend at work? Do you feel connected? Like all the different things that we feel better about. And he said, we would change it in a heartbeat because we get so much pushback on it, except for one stubborn fact. And it is the question that makes the biggest difference is, do you have a best friend at work? So when the publishers were like, let's not use that word, I was like, oh, what do I do with that? You know, but like, this is the thing. Like we can all be squirmy around whether we want friends at work, but it is the thing that makes the biggest difference. So I feel like all of that is bucking the system, constantly trying to teach people. Like, I'm not out there trying to market myself. I'm out there trying to talk about why the topic is even important, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, most people, I have to sell the topic, not me. Like the topic is what's so hard.
Well, and I think it's such a great lesson because a lot of times when people give that type of advice, whether it was your publisher or, decision maker at a company, it's probably less about their intuition on what's needed and more about their fear that it will make them look bad. Oh, if I hire somebody and the keynote says it's about friendships, or if we do a study or we do a book and my boss sees I just acquired a book about, it's usually so. It's
Yeah.
such it's such an important example, and people listening, obviously strip away, the book or the context, like. It's what I always talk about. You got to 50% rule everything, including people's advice. And you always got to go back to what is the intent. And I love those stories because if anybody's ever written a book, we know how influential a publisher can be when they say, because the first thought is, well, they know the market and they know the strategy and they do this all day long and they've done it for 300 books. But your gut, that visceral gut and your experience was for so long. And I, I personally, I got that all the time when I first started talking about authenticity. I had a coach that was like, well, maybe you talk authentically, but you shouldn't talk about authenticity. You should talk about I've been told a million times, you have to solve a problem and authenticity is actually the answer. And what if you just, and I remember just wrestling with it because I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I can see how that would make sense. But then everything in my body and my soul was like, no, I talk about authenticity as a strategy and it is the forefront and et cetera. So I love that story. And I hope people, whenever you get advice, that you stop and you 50% rule it and you think, what half of this advice do I keep, but what half do I throw out because I have the knowledge, the experience, I have the vision. You have the vision, Shasta, that nobody else has ever had for this stuff. And if you didn't fight back and you didn't buck the trend, then so much of your great work would probably never have happened. So I love that so much.
Thank you.
Before I ask the last question, which I promise is a lot easier, where can people connect with you and follow you?
Well, shastanelson.com is the website where the hub of all the things. So if you're interested in the speaking, or I also do women's international trips, those are on there, and book stuff is all you can find all that stuff there. But yeah, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So come connect with me and let me know you've heard me through Erin, and you'll be an instant somebody I already love and trust and know.
All right. And then it's just about consistently engaging in your posts and your content, right? Last question. What is your one final tip for our listeners to make work suck less?
I love that. Make a friend. You have to say that. Make a friend. But yeah, we would never send our kids to school and say, Now go to school, but don't make any friends because you're there to learn. And we just need to keep your learning and your friendships separate. Like it gets too messy, right? We understand that that kid actually learns better if they feel connected. We understand that that kid will not take information in if they feel like they don't fit in, if they feel excluded, if they feel isolated. We get that they don't feel safe and that they won't really take in the information. We know that kids do better when they feel connected and have relationships, even though it makes school messier and even though it's a little less efficient and even though there's drama, like we still know that the value is more valuable than that the cost. And yet when it comes to the workplace, we're so afraid of like the messy and the cost a little bit. And like well, what do we do in this situation if you're the leader? And like, I just get so much pushback. What about gossip? And I'm just like, you can have a workplace where you have a policy that nobody can make friends. And I guarantee you will still have favoritism, you will still have gossip, you will still have all those things that you're scared of. Like those are not the cost of friendship. That's the cost of human interaction. And your solution is actually start talking about it, training for, and having healthy expectations around friendship. But really, we just need to like make friends at work. I promise you, your happiness goes up. Your job is the number one thing for job satisfaction. The number one thing. It outperforms the money you're making.
That's crazy.
It slightly outperforms the purpose if you feel like those are all important things. I'm not saying that those don't matter, but it outperforms every other thing at work. The number one thing for job satisfaction is you like who you work with and building friendships there. So that's where you should invest your time.
And you know what? I believe it because I met my best friend and my husband of 21 years at work. So, right, it could even go further than that. Thank you so much, Shasta. You're such an incredible thought leader and visionary. And I just can't wait to continue to watch all you do. And I know our listeners will do the same. So thank you for giving us your time today.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.